Hi everyone, join me today as we paint this old rusty watering can in watercolor. The sketchbook I'm using today is a Stillman & Burns Beta Series sketchbook. This is a multimedia sketchbook rather than a pure watercolor, so as such it's not as fantastic quality as a 100% cotton watercolor paper, but it's more than suitable for a small sketch like this one. I am going to clamp my pages open with a clip and begin my pencil sketch. I'm going to use a 2B pencil rather than a clutch pencil because I do find it easier to erase the marks using a softer pencil like this rather than a clutch pencil. I will provide a free downloadable and traceable image for you in the description box below. If you would prefer to trace the sketch, then feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can sketch along with me. This reference photograph was provided by my friend Lillian. Lillian also lives in Chiang Mai. I met her at our weekly yarn group meeting, but she is from the Netherlands. Lillian is actually visiting the Netherlands at the moment, and she sent me this photograph. She is very generous with the sharing of photos and will often come up with the most beautiful photographs upon my request. I haven't been to the Netherlands yet and would love to one day, but for now I will use Lillian's photos until I can get there myself one day. I will be sketching a few Netherlands sketches in the coming weeks, and this is the first of them. Lillian says that this is a zinc gieter, which means watering can in Dutch. This type of gieter is used to water the outdoor plants and vegetables. She says that a lot of Dutch people used to have a special garden to grow vegetables. Gardens like this are not always connected to the house, but on a special plot outside of the town. A big area is divided into smaller plots that people can rent and grow their own vegetables there. The Dutch name for this garden is a moestuin, which means vegetable garden. People would grow all sorts of vegetables and potatoes throughout the year, but would also stock up for the winter. Lillian says that you are allowed to build a small shed on your moestuin plot, but that you may not sleep in it overnight. So it is not meant to be a dwelling, but just a garden shed. Lillian was visiting her old relative in Rotterdam, where this moestuin is, and the watering can belongs to him. She says that it is probably decades old. The old man still visits his moestuin every day, but is sadly getting too old to maintain it. In today's sketch, I'm going to go straight from the pencil sketch into watercolor. I've decided that I'm not going to use any ink in this sketch. I'm just correcting some of the proportions at the bottom of the watering can here, and when I'm happy with the proportions of everything, I'm going to go into the watercolor. Today I'm going to use my Daniel Smith palette of colors, and I'm just going to moisten the paints to activate them. I'm going to use a size 8 round silver black velvet brush. I'm going to start by mixing a very weak consistency solution of Payne's Grey that I'm going to use as the base color on my watering can. Although I'm putting the grey paint down here onto dry paper, the technique I'm going to use for adding the rust is essentially going to be wet and wet, but rather than putting the rust colors into just watery foundation, I'm going to drop them into this very weak grey foundation color that I'm laying. So I'm making sure to make the color that I'm putting down here really quite wet so that it doesn't dry and that it is going to give me enough time to start dropping in my shadow colors when I'm ready. But for now, I'm just covering the whole grey area of the watering can with the Payne's Grey base color. Another reason why I'm using the Daniel Smith Payne's Grey as the base color here is that this is a granulating color. That means that if it is put into a very watery mix, as it is here, the colors will separate into the blue and the black that make up the Payne's grey color. And I quite like that for the textured, rusty look that I'm going to be forming on the surface of the watering can. Now I'm going to start working on my rust colors, and I will mix up quinacridone sienna as well as some Venetian red. I'm going to take that Venetian red now, and I'm going to drop it in around the areas of the watering can where I can see that rusty brown color. I'll dot it around the top as well as around the base of the watering can and on the handle. Using this wet in wet technique means that as I drop the color into the grey, it will spread out nicely. In order to avoid the cauliflower or blooming effect that you sometimes can get when you're using this technique, always make sure that the consistency of the paint that you're dropping in is thicker than the paint that you've already laid down. If my reddish color was extremely watery and I dropped it in on top of the grey here, making it wetter than what I'm putting it onto, it would then bloom out and form cauliflower edges. But in this case it won't, because the consistency of the red color is thicker than the grey. Now I want to darken up some of the grey areas that I've already laid down, so I'm going to make up a thicker consistency mix of the Payne's grey and also just dot that now around the can in the areas that are a little bit darker. You can see the granulation of the Payne's grey now, that as I drop it in, you can see it separating into the blue and the black from which it is made. That is an effect of granulating paints that I really like, but some people find it frustrating. It just depends on your preference and also on the sketch and the effect that you're trying to obtain. Now I want to do the yellow spout, so I'm mixing in together some buff titanium and azo yellow, and I'll lay that in for the spout. I'm not worrying about any shadows or anything at this stage. I'm just getting the base colors down in this first layer. I want to build up a bit more contrast in the second layer, so I am mixing up some Payne's grey and Sodalite Genuine. Then I'm going to put some water down on the spout of the watering can, and I'll alternate between these two colors, dropping in on the bottom shadow side. Then I'll add some of the Venetian red as well, just to increase the contrast on the rust color. I'll add the Sodalite Genuine along the seam, and then I'll create a shadow around the inner seam of the top half of the lid here. The rust color has lightened, so I will also just add in some more of the rust color as I'm dropping in the shadow color. I will just continue moving around wet and wet so that the color does blend. Wherever I see some shadow area that I would like to add, I'll put down a little bit of clean water into the area first and then drop in my shadow colors and allow the colors to blend. Now I'm going to work on this deeply shadowed inner side of the watering can. I'm going to slightly moisten the area and then work in neutral tint, which is darker than the colors that I've got already. I'm going to drop that in and then also just increase the shadow area with my Sodalite Genuine as well as my rust color. The shadow is the darkest on the left hand side, and so I'm going to start with it as dark as I can get it on the left and allow it to fade lighter towards the right. Now I want to get the shadow under the grooves on the side of the watering can, but I'm going to do them one at a time, otherwise they will all blend into each other. So I'm putting water down for the top groove. As soon as that's down, I'm going to drop in Payne's grey in the top and allow it to blend down. I will leave out the middle groove for now so that they don't all blend into one, and I will do the same for the bottom groove. Just put in my water and then my Payne's grey, and then I'll move across to the shadow under the handle on the right hand side. I will work wet and wet and drop in the shadow color underneath the handle and let it blend downwards. Then I will do the same where the handle meets the bottom and allow that to blend upwards, and then just add a bit of a shadow along the edge. I check first and the middle groove area is dry enough to work in, so I will repeat the same by putting some water in and then adding my shadow color. And then I'll add a bit of a shadow to the base of the watering can. Now that I have allowed the entire sketch to dry, I'm going to have a look at it in comparison to the photograph and do another pass over the entire sketch, looking for contrast and shadow colors. It is in this stage where we will start building up more contrast and a little bit more of a pop to the sketch, and we'll only get that if we can increase the contrast. Try and push some of the darker areas darker whilst leaving the lightest areas alone. So I'm just going to go by feel and move around the sketch, adding in the darker colors and rust colors wherever I feel that the sketch could do with a little bit more. I want to incorporate an additional color into the outside of the watering can. I'm going to mix up a bit of sepia and drop that into some of the areas that I think could have a little bit of brown added to them. I just want a mixture of different colors here, so I will alternate between the reds, browns and blues. And now I'm just going to push the shadow under the handle darker to increase the contrast. There is this additional crescent shaped inlay in the top of the watering can. I'm going to use wet and wet to do a wet edge around the edge of the shape and then drop in the shadow around the edge. Now I'm going to work on the top handle a little bit. I'm going to define the edge of the handle more clearly by making it a little bit darker. Then I'll work on the edge where the handle bends under the edge of the can, and then I'm going to do a shadow around the bottom of the handle on the side of the watering can. I'm going to try and push this inner shadow even darker to try and create the maximum amount of contrast that I can. I want to give a rounded look to the spout of the watering can, and the way to do this will be to do a gradual shadow from the bottom up the side, and that will give it the curvature look that I am wanting. I'm just going to make this shadow darker on the side where the handle is attached to the side of the watering can. Then I'm going to work wet on the top of the can here down the side, just putting in some water and making the shadow a little bit darker. Now I want to create a more exaggerated curvature to the exterior of the watering can, and in order to do that I'm going to do the same graduated shadow from the outside, the dark on the outside, and then use a wet brush to fade that shadow lighter as we move towards the center. Once that's done, I will just go in with an even darker section of the shadow color on the outside to accentuate the curve. When the watering can was dry, I went in with Serpentine Genuine primarily to do the grassy area around it. I used Serpentine Genuine again because it's a highly granulating color, and you can see all the different colors of green that form because of the use of this granulating color. I hope that you found this tutorial useful, and if you did, I'd really appreciate a like, comment and subscribe. Until next time. Bye for now.